We're now pleased to welcome a XLP friend of the show, SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey.
It's great to be here. There's 2 points of intimidation. One, I'm looking around at all these cameras.
Yeah, they're everywhere
like
now.
who are documenting this thing in 16 different ways. There were fewer cameras to check exit velocity of the home run derby baseballs than there are checking me. Yeah. So those 2 points.
So before we get into it, okay, I want to give everybody a little explanation of how the sausage is made here. So you introduce the coaches. Every coach comes up. You introduce them and say, okay, this, here's Jeff Levy, and you have like these nice facts and figures that you come up with.
I do.
Now,
I'm looking for what I did with mine.
Right. So my question to you is, you're clearly the leader of the free amateur sports world. How do you come up with the time to have these facts and figures?
There's 2 parts of it. One is I am provided because our staff goes to the schools and says, can you give us some facts that we can use? And then I'll have a conversation backstage, and I know them. Like I asked Lane, I want to respect your dad.
Right.
I want to respect you. So tell me about a note that I asked for on just him that I could use, but how do I position it? But leading up to that, I did not ask him for permission to talk about. He sends me text pictures with like the biggest fish he caught that off season.
Right.
He sent me one like random from hot yoga last fall at some point. And I hadn't sent me anything from pickleball. But with Jeff, I had this note about his son, and you want to be respectful of somebody's family. Right. And Kaylin was at his daughter's softball tournament the last couple days. And I don't want to say something like that without asking them. So those were in notes. And then there's some other things. Like Billy and I were talking as he went up, and I was checking on who was coaching with Furman, Bobby Johnson, who we know from his Vanderbilt days. And then I was the Southland Conference Commissioner, 1AA football. I would go to the national championship game, and the light bulb went off that I had seen him quarterback Furman when they played Montana.
How good is that?
In 2001.
Yeah,
so
that's
small world.
So you get all the important notes. Hey, Greg, do you like where we've landed? The world has changed so much in college athletics, and you're a big part of that. To Matt's point, you're probably the leader of it. Do you like where we land? And there's a lot of parts to that question. I know that. But do you like where we are?
I don't think we've landed.
Okay.
I don't like where we are. So I'm parsing it out. I think we have an opportunity for a direction towards a better destination, which, holistically, where the young people involved benefit more, they benefit appropriately, we have protections for them, we have support for them, we still have opportunities for them. So nobody's taking things away. I think to achieve that, we need to make our own decisions around settlement outcomes. We're doing that with plaintiff's attorneys, so we don't just get to dictate it. There's a court involved, so there's a lot of runway left there, using the metaphor about destination and a direction. And then, what other decisions can we make that are well established, don't create legal risk, and then where do we need either state legislative or federal legislative assistance?
I think you made a great point in your State of the Union. When you were talking about, look, this is so much more than just one problem. I don't even like to use the word problem because I think it's great that the young guys are getting their ability to earn while playing the game. You're dealing with the conference, you're dealing with universities, you're dealing with the federal government, you're dealing with the courts. You're working the problem on many different levels right now, right?
Right, yeah. There are 5 fields of play, using a football metaphor. Courts, we have to be there. Congress, that's where you can set a national standard. The states, they're deciding either in the attorney general level or at the legislative level to have this patchwork that really doesn't support Final Fours. If we really play this out, there is no Final Four. I was criticized heavily for talking about automatic bids maybe shifting a little bit, some of the pressure there. I'm not talking about we want March Madness. Well, to have March Madness, you have to have national standards. I think that's just like too evident. We don't want college championships to be state college championships. There is a bit of a history there. That's high school. We don't need to go back to high school. And then the conference has a role to play, and I think perhaps with our states, if we can define the nature of our desires, and then the NCAA still exists, and it's a big organization that has to change. So that's the scope of kind of those are the playing fields.
Just
now, the pieces on the playing field are a whole different set of issues.
Right.
Greg Sankey with us, the SEC Commissioner, Frangie. Matt Hayes with you. As for your league, you were asked enough times about recruiting other teams. I appreciate your position on that. We've done that enough. But as for the 16 you've got, you stayed in the contiguous states, which was a big deal to you. You've said it many times. You've got blue bloods upon blue bloods. Do you like where it landed as you get set for the 2024 SEC season?
Absolutely, I do. we're in decision-making control. You don't control everything, but we have the ability as a league of 16 to make decisions about our future and not be reacting to everyone around us. And given your geographic location, it's fine to ask me. I gave the folks in Columbia, South Carolina, because it's also a local story. I'm not out recruiting. I'm not on the phone talking to people about going beyond 16 as a really healthy number, but not just a healthy number. It's a healthy organization with peer institutions and peer athletic programs, and just shooting for a number. I don't think that's a well-informed approach. There are two directives from our presidents to me. One is you do not entangle us in litigation around expansion, period. I can't be any more clear than that. You obviously have litigation around members saying, wait a second, I agreed to things and we voted on things, but I don't like that. And that's my unsophisticated commentary, and the courts will determine, where that heads. The second thing they've said is don't spend my money to add members, which means you have to accrue value from expansion. And we've done that going from 14 to 16. Those are two quite clear directives that are front and center for me as we consider things. And I have to be aware of what's happening. I'm not going to be inattentive, but I'm not looking to be the pot stirrer right now.
And that's and I know everybody laughs when I say this. That this situation right now is so created by the vacuum, the black hole of social media, that everybody's saying, well, it's a foregone conclusion that this team's going here and that team's going there and this team. There's so much more involved. Like, you guys literally adding these two teams over the last, I don't know how many, like 2.5 years you guys have been doing this.
3, yeah.
3. Like, it's been a arduous process, has it not?
It has. Now it is a long runway. So when we added A&M, it was basically a little under 12 months from entry announcement to actual entry. Missouri was 10 months, and that was a compressed time frame. We've been as thorough as can be, but there's a lot to the movement, and I don't think that's understood or appreciated. It's not just scheduling. It's contractual adjustments. It's our rules, our regulations of how games are conducted are going to vary. And I've been on Twitter for, 12, 13, 14 years before I was commissioner. I never saw the for you and following. So I always had my following, what I followed. And like a month ago,
don't do it, man.
Right.
Don't click on
go back to the followers. Go back to the followers.
Like click over to for you. Like that's a frightening place.
It is.
What's the scariest place I've ever been?
It's the
for you column.
Go back to the right.
On X. I mean, like the stuff that's in there about us. Forget what happened over the weekend.
Yes.
But like, I'll look and like. Well, these 6 schools are moving here, and those. 4
Well, everybody's
moving
an
here.
expert. Well, that's the problem.
And I'm like, I'm reading it, and I know who's not calling, right? And I know why some of those scenarios aren't realistic. So stay on the following side.
Yeah, you say right. So, but I want to, as an observer, not someone in the fray, are you surprised at the free-for-all that followed? I mean, all of it. I mean, SMU and Cal and Stanford and FSU and Clemson suing. And did that free-for-all surprise you at all?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Why
okay,
did it
okay,
happen?
why?
Why did it happen? Yeah, why did it surprise you?
You're not going to get away with just yes.
Yeah,
Come on, why?
When, depending on what you read in the for you section, this is all my fault, or it's not all my fault. Depending, if you go to the following section, it's generally not my fault. If you go to the for, it's all my fault because we took text and all about. Let's look back. I was not surprised that movement happened in the mid-2020s. I thought 22, 23. Looking forward to TV contract expiration, and I didn't want to be in that circumstance. I wanted us to have some certainty around what we were doing. I also knew some of our existing agreements and how we had to position ourselves best, and that's a whole other like master's level course in negotiating, I think. And I may be criticized for it down the road, but you can deal with what's on the table.
Right.
So that said, when in 2015, I said to our presidents and chancellors, I think the Big 12 will be the first to have a problem. And you think about, well, why does conference movement happen? And I think this is a really important lesson. And I don't know if I'm talking through a break.
No,
when I was here and I was a 1AA commissioner, they moved because of media and TV. That's what I thought. They moved because of politics. That's the second reason. They moved because of geography. Conference expanded because of need. Like You see that in some of the smaller conferences. They go to the Metro Atlantic Conference and somebody adds a bunch of Division IIs. In relationships was the fifth. I actually think there's another reason now that I'm here. And so I'll come back to you. Was I surprised? I think institutions look around the room and say, oh, wait a second. This doesn't look like us as much anymore. And when A&M left, and when Missouri left, and when Nebraska left, and when Colorado left before they came back, I think Oklahoma and Texas, and this is what I said to presidents in 2015, here's the demographics, here's the time when these contracts come up, but one of the realities is they're going to look around and say, we really don't have the same peers. We have these relationships.
Right.
And I don't mean to diminish anyone, but when you're sitting there in Austin and you're at, 50-plus thousand students with what they do, and you look around and say, well, there's Florida, and there's Georgia, and there's Texas A&M, and there's the University of Alabama, and there's Vanderbilt. That's who we are.
Right.
I think that has gone on in the last 3 years and is still going on, that same kind of view. So back to your question. My president said, you're creating an existential threat for the Big 12. Can you explain to us how that group exists and it doesn't implode for everyone? And I went 3 for 4 on who I predicted they would add. I didn't see the BYU situation playing out just because they had been through that,
sure.
but they're at 12, so they were fine.
Really, you predicted UCF and Houston and Cincinnati?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep. I was 3 or 4.
Wow.
I won't tell you the other one because I was wrong.
Okay.
But
who might have been? USF, I'm trying to think who he might have had.
750 will put you in the Hall of Fame.
He probably had
That's right.
Memphis is what he probably
Put you
had.
in the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
And so I could come back and say, well, I think this is the next move on the chessboard. And then I've been asked, well, what's next after that? I had been told and had a little bit of outreach on the West Coast that the discontent there was real. And this was in 21, and it grew a little bit greater in 22. So you could see some of that. But then, could I anticipate that Stanford and Cal were going to be in the Atlantic Coast Conference? No. And really not until the Pac-12 commissioner, the former Pac-12 commissioner, was on camera at a SMU game was I thinking that somebody was thinking there. And we talked through what was rumored to be moved, and one of our presidents, the chancellor, said, look, we know who we are. Our fans know who we are. The level of interest and competitive opportunity and support we have is without compare. Why would we go out there? Why would that make sense for us? And it was a 5-minute conversation.
Quick, huh?
Yeah, but I think you go back and my diagnosis about why people make these decisions, you could argue he's way off base.
No, I think you're pretty close.
But
actually.
I went through those 5, and then it dawns on me. People look around and say, well, this really isn't us in a way. And the tough part is people make commitments. There are contracts. And like I said, our president said, you're not going to entangle us in litigation. That's abundantly clear.
But that also goes to what you told me this for now probably 2 or 3 years. You said you and the presidents, your pie in the sky world is everything to be what it was. Like the Pac-12 is still alive.
Yeah.
Everybody's happy.
I wrote a note. It was Destin last year, a memo that said, I'd love everybody to stay where they is. Now, that's convenient for me. We took Texas to Oklahoma,
yeah,
so
right.
we're advantaged.
But
I still don't feel threatened by anybody else. I mean, the Big Ten made some moves. That's great. We're still the SEC, for goodness sake.
So the point I wanted to make, and I don't want to belabor the point, this is the last thing we're talking about, is does part of you feel bad for Wazoo and Oregon State that they're in the dust?
I reached out. I had an incorrect phone number for Scott Barnes early August, so started to rumble on my birthday on a Thursday. I was at a conference on Friday. It happened. I got phone calls, and on Saturday I reached out to Pat Chun, who was at Washington State at the time, and I had an old phone number for Scott to say, look, I don't have anything to offer, but I feel bad that I called Bernard Muir. I still don't have the athletic director at Cal phone number, but yeah, I would not have. I didn't see it needed to go that direction. I understand why it did,
right?
But I don't look back at our move as the tipping point. I think there was more. There's a more informed perspective, and I'll go back. You were talking about old conversations. May of 2020, you were posting me up about could you make a decision different from everybody else about playing or not playing.
Right.
And I was trying to soft pedal it. But I've always thought about that question, and my answer is people say, well, there should be a czar, right? It should be one person to run it.
Right.
Can you imagine that circumstance again where there's like one person trying to navigate all of these communities and campuses?
No, because you were that person, and you would have posted up and said, we're doing it.
Yeah, but then,
you
know, how do you move people to that? So
right.
you could do that in a small way. And then you look at everything that's happened since. And, people keep bringing it up. But just, you're going to have to cede total authority for decision-making away from your campus. And,
right.
Perhaps people are ready for that part of the modern era, but I haven't sensed it at this
That would
time.
Also mean ceding the media rights, which
that's a whole
you guys
other
are never going to do, right?
litigious issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Greg, final question. 12 playoff teams. We know now how they're going to be picked. Those of us that cover this league wouldn't be bothered if there were 4 or 5, however many teams in it. How should
7. That's the max.
How should that play out? It should be the best. It should be the automatics and the best, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Will it be that way?
That's clear expectation. So we do have selection criteria. You want to know how the evaluation is conducted. And, the rigor of our schedule, particularly at 16, even with 8 games, is substantial. So you take Georgia, just because it's easy to remember. Within the league, they play at Ole Miss, finished with a win over Penn State, had 2 losses last year to Georgia and to Alabama. They play at Alabama, and they play at Texas. This is Georgia.
Right.
I mean, who's got 3 games like that on their schedule?
Yeah.
And they play Florida, too. Yeah. Don't forget that.
No, that's right. I'm going. The neutral site, but I'm going to away.
Yeah.
And then they open with Clemson.
Right.
They finish with Georgia Tech, and there's a lot in between. How are you evaluating that against other schedules?
Yeah.
That could be think last year. That was one of the 4 best teams, period.
And there's no question.
There's people in your listening audience that say, well, there he goes again.
Yeah.
We didn't stomp our feet.
Right.
We didn't, fly banners over places. That was one of the 4 best teams.
Right.
They lost 1 game in 2 years. Bad second half, second quarter, third quarter. And in the future, if they're 9-3 compared to a 10-2 or 11-1, the standard is not 10-2 or 11-1 It's the best teams.
Well, that's what. And I know we're going way long on you.
Right, Captain, your wonderful
mad at us, so I'm
assistant's
going to go
getting ready
fast.
to kill
But,
us.
but you're right.
This is your time.
Yeah, but a
This
9
is your time, not my
but
time.
that 9-3 Georgia team, if we all clearly think they're better than 11-1 North Carolina, who doesn't win that league, they should be in ahead of them. But there's going to be consternation.
Oh, yeah.
That's we all know that. Right?
That's where people say, well, you're ruining the regular season. Are you kidding me?
It's even better now.
Yeah. That was my theory, hypothesis, if you will, about the 12-team playoff, is it enhances. So when you break it down, you have to understand it's not the 12 best teams.
Right.
It's the 5 best conference champions. 4 of them get a bye and know where they are. Then you've got a 5th that gets seeded, and then you've got the 7 remaining best teams.
Right.
That's the expectation. So you may be ranked 12th and not in because a 16th ranked conference champion's in. That's the deal. That's more access for better teams. And that 5th spot may be among 5 conferences that may have 3 or 4 teams November 1st vying for a conference championship and opportunity. There's 20 teams that are in. And then the top 20 has the ability to access those remaining spots, arguably.
Yeah.
In the past, if you weren't in the top 10 November 1,
forget it.
You're not playing for the championship, and we value those things so much.
All right, we could talk to you for the next 40 minutes, but Catherine's going to come up top.
We're going to get in trouble.
How much time do we have?
So go do what you got to do. He
He
wants to stay here. Come on.
Yeah, we're in trouble.
We're good.
We're
good?
Yeah, 5
All right,
minutes.
good. All right, good. So, because I want to ask you this. Thank you, Catherine. So we talked about this as well, too. The playoff's going to change in 26. Could move more teams. You have said all along your preference is all at large.
Oh, I'm leaving. I'm done.
Is there a way?
I hope we have video of his face when I said that.
Is there a way you can get there or no? All at
I don't
large.
think we need to. Oh, that part. So let's put beyond 12 to the side. That's where it rightly is.
Right.
I've always been fine with the blank best teams. 8, 4.
Right.
5.5, whatever the number. 12 was a compromise of perspectives. And one of my concerns is with the conference movement that we've had, this is real. And we saw it last year where the last team in the New Year's Six, who would have been that 5th best conference champion, was barely in the top 25. Barely in the top 25.
Yeah, 11 of the 12
Liberty
teams.
and SMU both lost their bowl games.
Right.
And I think there will be pressure if the 5th best conference champion remains barely in the top 25 or possibly outside the top 25, replacing the 12th ranked team. That will become a problem over time. Not because I say it's a problem. It's going to give you guys on radio fodder.
Of course.
And when I go to the For You section, it's going to flare up, and then they're going to follow. Man. They're going to get me on the following section.
Yeah. So do you think you could eliminate AQs or no? I know that's your preference,
now.
but
Well, there's no AQs. It's could you walk away from conference champion?
Right.
Or could you narrow it? Now, I think politically, and I mean big picture politically, you go back to the pre-BCS era and even the BCS era, you had congressional hearings about access. Well, we haven't had any access-related hearings for the postseason once we went to the CFP. So part of the 5th best conference champion is the recognition that we are in this together, and they have an access point they've never had. But they have, in my view, a responsibility to elevate the competitive situation of the programs consistently.
Your point, too, we're staying away from Beyond 12, but when we get to Beyond 12, which I believe we will at some point, there's still only so many conferences. So then that problem's not a problem. I mean, then the best teams are all in, right? I mean, I know you don't want to go Beyond 12 for now. I hear you.
Well, there's a great book that I had my staff read that they dislike called The Art of Possibility.
Right.
And we should live in the art of possibility. We should practice the art of possibility from time to time. Not all the time, because then you don't get anything done.
Right.
And when you think about, well, is there something different? If we're going to do that, then we should practice the art of possibility.
Yeah. And that'll get everybody in. Greg Sankey, the Commissioner of the SEC, you were terrific. I'm sorry we got you in trouble. Thanks for stopping by.
Catherine went, sat down, crossed her arms, and stared at me, so I was not getting another extension.
Greg, thank you so much. Man. We appreciate it very much.
Have fun the rest of the week.
Yep,
thank you, Catherine.
Hey, Mia here, and thanks so much for watching 1010XL's coverage of the 2024 SEC Media Days, brought to you by Instant Keys. If you're looking for even more college football content this fall, be sure to subscribe to our 1010XL Gators, 1010XL Seminoles channels.